and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video, we'd like to talk about Dark Moon the Blood Altar, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of episode 1, both on Webtoon and on Wattpad, to see what they can tell us about this unfolding storyline. Now, since chapter 1 on Webtoon is very different from chapter 1 on Wattpad, please keep in mind that this video will contain spoilers for both, so in case you're not caught up, I highly suggest you go read them both to get the full Dark Moon experience. Also, since the release schedule is getting messier than I thought for these stories, please let me know if this format works for you or maybe you want me to change it. If maybe in the future you want me to continue like this, like one chapter a week for each platform, or maybe, do a separate video about the Wattpad and, maybe update weekly for the Webtoon, or maybe something completely different, don't hesitate to let me know. In the meantime, however, today we're gonna take it easy. We're gonna have an introduction of the story, of the characters, and take a look at the two first chapters to see what they can tell us about the story moving forward. So without further ado, let's jump right in and see what's going on. Now, Dark Moon with ENHYPEN is a series that talks about the lives of 7 vampire brothers over the span of 1,000 years. In this world, vampires can either be good or bad, but in the story, ENHYPEN are good vampires who are a little more powerful than the others. As the story will unfold across many eras and locations, the events will gradually show us the many mysteries surrounding the boys' lives, but also the conflicting relationship that they have with the werewolves, which can be friends or foes depending on the situation. Now, the first installment of the series is obviously Dark Moon the Blood Altar, and according to the boys themselves, this part of the story will be essential moving forward. You see, as it was revealed all the way back in the press release, the Blood Altar will be primarily set in modern day after the 7 vampires had their memories sealed away. Up until now, we don't know if this is something that the boys did to themselves or if maybe it was done to them by someone else, but what we do know is that at the time of our story, the boys are students at the Desalis Academy. This is a prestigious private school by the ocean that is located in the town of Riverfield, but even if it's tailored for very special students and it also offers night classes, this is a place that doesn't seem to like vampires very much. This means that in the story, the boys have to hide their true identity in front of the humans, but as it turns out, they seem to enjoy a lot of popularity nonetheless. This is because, on top of being very handsome and talented, the boys are also the members of the school's netball team, which is a sport that is played in the fictional reality of the story. Up until now, we don't know the rules of this game just yet, but by the looks of it, it kinda seems like a mix between rugby, Quidditch, and that baseball scene from Twilight. According to what we saw in the film, for instance, you play it with a glowing ball and there is this strange contraption that I'm assuming you have to hit with the ball, but for now, this is pretty much all we know. What we do know, however, is that in modern day, the boys are indeed netball players, and since they are super athletic, but also super attractive, but also super nice, but also super mysterious, but also very approachable, everybody has a crush on them. So let's meet them. Now, first up we have Jaka, which is Jungwon's character and the one with the white hair, green eyes and the ponytail. According to the film, his main power is speed, but he's also the smartest member of the group. Since him and the others have gone through a lot living among humans, Jaka feels very protective towards his brothers, so his main goal is essentially to keep them safe. Next up we have Xion, which is Sonu's character and the one with the blonde hair and the golden eyes. According to the film and even the debut trailer, to be honest, Xion is super fast and is essentially able to defy gravity by walking on walls and jumping very high. He's a troublemaker, but he's also very sociable and kind, so because of that he has many friends within the school. Next up we meet Gino, which is Jake's character, as well as the member with the red hair and the green eyes. He's the social butterfly of the group and the one who is friends with both humans and vampires, but his main trait is actually his power, because Gino is actually able to control fire. His pyrokinesis was also introduced all the way back in Drunken Days, and in the interview Jake said that his power will be very useful in the journey to come. Up next we have Jan, which is Jay's character and the one with the grey hair and golden eyes. He is described as an action taker who is very blunt and solid as a rock. Even if he looks mad all the time, deep down he has a very gentle heart and loves his brothers very much. After that we have Solon, which is Sunghoon's alter ego and the one with the blue hair and the odd eyes. In the interview he was described as calm and smart, but when he compares himself to his brothers, Solon also has an inferiority complex. His insecurity may or may not be connected to a part of himself that he tries to hide, because according to Sunghoon, Solon is a character with a secret. what if he's half? Like Theodice, like half vampire and half werewolf, or half vampire and half human. Next up we have Noah, who is Nikki's character and the one with the blue hair and the green eyes. Now, much like in real life, Noah is the youngest member of the group, and in the interview is described as a vampire with a lot of potential that can sometimes be also very hasty and impulsive. What's interesting about Noah, however, is that his character is actually able to control darkness, and even if up until now we don't know what it means, it's also something that would potentially make him very powerful. Last but not least, however, we have the male lead of the story, which is none other than Ellie. Now, Haley here is obviously Hee-sung's character. He's the one with the black hair and the golden eyes, and he's also the leader of the Desailly's Nightball team. In the story, Haley has the power of telepathy, and his abilities allow him to read people's thoughts, but also to communicate with the others using his mind. This is a power that was first introduced all the way back in Drunken Dazed, because at the beginning we saw Haley using telepathy to greet Jan. As it turns out, however, Drunken Days not only introduced us to the boy's powers, but also to the real protagonist of the story, which is none other than Sua. Now, Sua here is a new student at the Desailly's Academy, and she is described as a girl with a secret that no one can know. According to Jay, the story itself revolves around her finding her true self as she befriends vampire brothers who also grow up with her. Much like it was foreshadowed in Drunken Dazed, however, Sua will also become friends with the werewolves, which back in that video were played by Kay and EJ. And here we thought that she was dinner. Turns out she was a friend. Everybody vegan in this world. Fair enough. So as we'll see in a second, this is a very big change for Sua, because ever since the beginning we get the sense that growing up she never had many friends. In the webtoon, for instance, the story begins in an undetermined past where Sua is still a child. The opening scene shows us the tragic death of Chris, a 12-year-old boy who has had his blood drained out of his body and that has been impaled with a stake to keep him from rising again as a vampire. Soon enough, we discovered that this boy was actually a friend of Sua, and this is a very big deal because Chris was the only one who ever gave her a chance. You see, in the story, Sua is initially presented as a very strange child. She's the new kid in town, she's acting weird, and people being people, they did not waste any time starting to spread rumors about her identity. Since in this reality vampires exist and people know about them, Sua's evasive behavior is immediately considered suspicious, so when Chris dies at the hands of a vampire, the townsfolk accuse Sua right away. Little do they know, however, is that Sua is the first one to hate vampires because these creatures essentially ruin their life. You see, in the story, Sua is described as a girl with special abilities. She is very strong, very fast, and she has essentially the same powers of a vampire without being a vampire herself. Well, at least this is what we're led to believe up until now, because so far we don't know what Sua actually is, because to be honest, she doesn't know it herself. If we take a look at the webtoon, for instance, there are many instances where Sua herself actually suspects that she might be a vampire, and this is her greatest fear because, as I mentioned earlier, she hates vampires with all her guts. One person that doesn't believe her to be dangerous, however, is actually Chris himself, who is a person that knows very well what it means to be a bit different. As we see in the story, for instance, Chris was born with a limp, so his situation made him an outcast as well. He understands what Sua is going through, and because of that he chooses to be her friend, so after a while Sua actually tells him her secret. Instead of getting scared and thinking that she's a vampire, Chris actually accepts her for the person that she is. As a matter of fact, he trusts her so much that he even tells her to bite him in the neck to prove that she's not a vampire, and when she refuses to do that, Chris says to bite him the day that she will finally trust him and herself. Now, this event really resonates with Sua to the point that after this moment she starts opening up a bit more. One day, for instance, she goes to his place in order to ask him if he wants to see the fireflies, but when she gets there, the house is on fire and Chris is still inside. This is the moment Sua finally overcomes her fear of being exposed, because even if up until now she was always being told to keep her abilities a secret, now she uses her abilities in front of the crowd in order to save her friend from the fire. This leads her to finally trust herself, so after this event she keeps the promise that she made to Chris and bites him in the neck in order to prove that she's not the monster that she always thought she was. The problem is that Chris ends up dead anyway, so what's up with that? Did she do it? Is she really a vampire and she doesn't know? Well, up until now we obviously don't know, but in the webtoon they kinda want you to believe that she is guilty, and because of that I really think that she isn't. You see, if you look closely, the scene of her biting his neck might actually be a red herring. If we take a look at Chris's body, for instance, we see that the bite marks are on the left side of his neck. When Sua bites him, however, she bites him on the red side, so the bites essentially don't match. On top of that, the clothes don't match either, because when she bites him, Sua is actually wearing a pink dress and a white shirt. When he dies, she's wearing a purple dress and a pink shirt instead, and the same difference can actually be found in Chris's clothes as well. When Sua bites him, he has a vest and khaki pants, but while he's in the coffin, he has blue pants and suspenders, so this means that the boy's death took place in a completely different day. She's innocent, Your Honor, I cracked the case. Whether this is the case or not, however, Chris's death is an event that will affect her going forward, and this finally brings us to teenage Sua arriving at the Deselis Academy. Now this is where the problems start, not only in the story but also for us. You see, on paper, both the webtoon and the Wattpad are essentially showing us the very same event taking place. The main focus of the episode is on Sua arriving at the Deselis Academy, settling in, and meeting Ellie for the first time, which, bear in mind, is Isung's character. The problem is that if we compare the webtoon and the Wattpad, this event takes place in two completely different ways. But why is that? Why nothing ever makes sense? Let's take a look. Now in the webtoon, the very first encounter between Sua and Ellie actually takes place on the very same night that Sua arrives at the academy. We see her being escorted by a teacher, and the woman explains that the institution actually operates as a night school with classes starting from 9 p.m. According to the rules, students are not allowed to leave campus after sunset, and the teacher actually suggests to follow these rules for their own safety. You see, just a few nights before, a murder took place nearby, and the culprit was believed to be a vampire. The reason why Sua would be safer on campus is because the Deselis Academy has a strong policy against vampires, so these creatures are not allowed to attend, and they are not allowed to stand on the grounds. As we see right away, however, this is not exactly the case, because as soon as the teacher says that, Ellie appears right in front of Sua. Now, even if at this point Sua doesn't know it yet, we know that Ellie is a vampire, so the school's policy might actually be one of the reasons why the seven brothers are hiding their true identity. This is something that to an extent also allows them to live a normal life, but with the arrival of Sua, things might change very soon. In the meantime, however, the girl is super happy to be at the academy, to the point that even if her accommodation is far away from the dormitory and is a messy storage room, Sua doesn't really mind. You see, because of the strict policy against vampires, Sua thinks that now she can finally be free from the allegations that followed her all her life. Since no vampire can attend, then nobody will mistake her for one. Her relief, however, is very short-lived, because while she's studying up using her powers, Hailey barges in unannounced and surprises her in the act. This obviously sends her into a panic, because now she thinks that the rumors about her will start once again. Since Ellie is a very nice lad with secrets of his own, however, he actually promises that nothing bad will come out of it. You see, much like Chris in the past, Ellie says that he trusts her and that he knows that she's not a vampire, and this is something that immediately calms her down. By the end, the episode reinforces the idea that nobody hates vampires more than Sua, thus connecting us right back to her past and making Ellie panic instead. Now, up until now, I would say that everything is pretty much clear. Everything makes sense, everything is consistent, and yes, of course, we don't have all the answers, but at the same time, there is no confusion about the rules that this world is following. We have a reality where vampires are real, a school that doesn't tolerate them, a special girl with powers that hates vampires even if she might be one, and a boy that he's a vampire but tries to hide it. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? Wrong, because now we get to the Wattpad where none of this actually took place. Now in the Wattpad, the story begins 1 month after Sua arrived at school, and right off the bat, things are already all different. If in the previous version Sua follows night classes, for instance, in this version Sua follows day classes alongside other students. If in the webtoon she had a room by herself, moreover, in the Wattpad she has a roommate called Alex. If before she met Ellie right away, now a whole month has passed without them ever meeting, so as you can see, things are already starting to get mixed up. Now in this version, the entire premise of the story is that Sua and Alex actually want to sneak out after curfew in order to go to the stadium and see the nightball practice. As we already established before, all the members are part of the team, and since all of them are super handsome, super great, super cool and super athletic, all the girls want to see them practice. The hot topic of the conversation, however, is actually Haley, who is the captain of the team and, according to Alex, also the one that really needs to be seen in action. What's interesting here is that at this point, Haley is so attractive that Sua actually calls him a prince, and this actually reminded me of that scene of Drunken Days where the boys were dressed as royalty in a distant past. Now bear in mind, her calling him a prince might actually be a coincidence, but the fact that she repeats it a couple of times actually makes it very suspicious. If you recall, back in Border Day 1, the dusk version showed us the boys sitting in front of a throne. On top of that, at Mama 2021, the boys wore a uniform that spelled the word nobility, so this could imply that in the story the boys might actually have royal blood. For this part of the story, I guess they will have to wait and see, but in the meantime, in present day, we have the girls sneaking out in order to go see the boys. As Sua and her friends are approaching the stadium, however, Sua actually discovers that she forgot her phone, so she goes back by herself with the promise to catch up right away. Now, even if in this version everything seems different, one thing that didn't change is that in this version, Sua has superpowers as well. This is why in this context, she's not really worried about walking alone at night. She's fast, she is strong, and she can definitely take care of herself, but before she knows it, her abilities are put to the test because a hand reaches out from the darkness in order to grab her. When Sua dodges the attack multiple times, a man in his 40s eventually emerges from an alley, and this is where the man actually recognizes her. Now up until now we don't know why this man knows her, but what we do know is that this man is not actually a man. As he goes in for the attack, his eyes turn red, so seeing this, Sua attacks him back without hesitation. While she is defending herself, however, a person suddenly gets in the way and she kicks them instead. When she looks up, Sua immediately recognizes Ellie, but if in the webtoon he has golden eyes, in this instance his eyes are black. This, however, doesn't really mean that he's human, because even if Sua kicked him in the stomach with all her strength, the captain didn't even flinch. On top of that, when Ellie comes through in order to defend her, he actually uses telepathy in order to communicate with her, so despite all the differences, Ellie is still pretty much a vampire. Before she knows it, Ellie and the man start fighting and disappear in the darkness of the alley. After a while, Sua hears a loud noise and the thud of a body falling on the ground, and a few seconds later, Ellie emerges from the shadows as the body of the creature lies in the background. Now this sight obviously shocks Sua, not so much for the body in the background, but because Ellie came through to help her and he actually beat a supernatural creature. What's interesting here is that even if this entity is obviously a vampire, Sua doesn't recognize him as such because she actually identifies him as a ghost. Now this is insane, right? Because in the other version, Sua is obsessed with vampires to the point that hating on them is pretty much her main personality trait. Now, however, it's actually very different because when Ellie eventually tells her that that thing was a vampire, she is actually very surprised. You see, in this version of reality, vampires are just a rumor. They are described as a minority that might exist in the shadows, but whose existence is unconfirmed. On top of that, Sua dreamt about these creatures ever since she was a child, and since she never knew that vampires were a thing, she always assumed that they were ghosts instead. In the meantime, however, by the end of the episode, we discovered that even if Sua's kick didn't hurt Ellie, it did indeed break the phone that he had in his pocket. When she offers to repay it, Ellie actually replies that she can repay him by meeting him the next day, so this night of murder and monsters actually ends with a date. Now this is all cool and all, right? But why are the two versions so different? Well, as of right now, we obviously don't know for sure, but my guess is that it might be somehow related to the two timelines that we actually see in the videos as well. You see, up until now, my general idea was that even if these two realities were going on at the same time, one was set in the present and one was set in the past, mostly because the outfits were different. Now, if we look at the webtoon and the Wattpad, we can actually say that these two versions do kind of fit the two timelines that we were shown up until now. In the webtoon, the outfits are more old-timey, whereas in the Wattpad they walk around carrying phones, so to an extent they both fit the two worlds that we were presented since day one. After reading these chapters, however, I think that the issue is not so much being past versus present, but rather two different versions of the present going on at the same time. You see, if we take a look at the webtoon, for instance, it's true that there are people dressed in period clothing, but it's also true that this is a reality where these outfits actually coexist with jeans and t-shirts. We see modern power lines in the background, electricity, and when Sua gets a room, we even see headphones, weights, as well as modern lockers. On top of that, we also see the same ball and uniform that appeared in the modern timeline of Tamed and Dashed, meaning that even if this version seems like the past, in reality it might just be an alternative present that simply evolved differently. Bear in mind, in Outro the Wormhole, Jake told us that multiple dimensions wait for us and that there might be a world where day and night coexist. Because of that, the different versions that we see might be none other than the two parallel dimensions on opposite sides of the wormhole, but to know how this connects us to the rest of the story, we'll have to wait and see. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!